I'm speaking to you today from the Roosevelt, the Treaty Room in the White House, the same spot where on October of 2001, President George W. Bush informed our nation that the United States military had begun strikes on terrorist training camps in Afghanistan.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
It was just weeks after the terrorist attack on our nation that killed 2,977 innocent souls.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime.
I'm now the fourth United States president to preside over American troop presence in Afghanistan. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I will not pass this responsibility on to a 5th. After consulting closely with our allies and partners, with our military leaders and intelligence personnel, with our diplomats and our development experts, with the Congress and the Vice President, as well as with Mr. Ghani and many others around the world, I've concluded that it's time to end America's longest war. It's time for American troops to come home.
As US troops prepare to exit Afghanistan, the war-torn country is facing multiple crises. A wave of assassinations have hit urban centers since peace talks began between the Taliban and the Afghan government last year in Doha. Many of them targeting government employees, health workers, media, and civil society members. In May 2020, Afghan authorities opened prison doors for hundreds of Taliban inmates. It was a high-risk gambit to spur the Taliban to start peace talks with Kabul. The newly liberated fighters then vowed to resume their holy war, and the result is now in front of our eyes. Dozens of districts have fallen to the Taliban since the 1st of May, when US and NATO troops began their final departure from Afghanistan. Afghan translators who helped these foreign forces fear being killed and tortured in targeted assaults by the Taliban. If this wasn't bad enough, the country is also witnessing its worst COVID-19 wave since the start of the pandemic. With its medical infrastructure weakened by decades of war, a health catastrophe is unfolding in Afghanistan. What will be the fallout of America's withdrawal? Will Afghanistan become a safe haven for terrorists once again? Will Biden agree to evacuate Afghan allies who helped the United States? What could the future hold for Afghanistan? Group hugs. lighting candles in remembrance, and prayers. "15-year-old Fatima Nouri and her classmates are trying to overcome the trauma they suffered after a massive bomb went off outside their school in Kabul on the 8th of May. The militants exploded a bomb near a girls' school in the mostly Shiite district of West Kabul in Dasht-e-Barchi, leaving at least 80 dead and wounding nearly 180. Most of the victims were female students. Nouri had just finished her classes and was in the corridor getting ready to go home when the explosion shook the entire neighborhood. Luckily, she was unhurt. The school has been closed ever since, but a local NGO and the Ministry of Public Health have been holding psychotherapy classes to help survivors recover from anxiety and depression.
After the blast, when I went to school to attend the psychotherapy class, I was very scared and worried that the same incident might happen again. I even fainted near the school gate.
At the high school, girls and boys study in 3 shifts. The attack targeted the second shift, which is for female students. The Afghan government blamed Taliban militants for the attack, but the group has denied any involvement. The minority Hazara neighborhood, where the school is located, has repeatedly been targeted by militants. The United States and other Western nations have touted a higher female literacy rate as one of the key successes of years of foreign presence in Afghanistan. But security is deteriorating as foreign forces prepare to leave, emboldening some hardline Islamist groups to threaten years of progress. During the Taliban's hardline rule from 1996 until their ouster in 2001, girls were blocked from school. Nearly all women had to quit work. Their movement was restricted and a strict dress code was enforced. According to the United States Agency for International Development, more than 3.5 million girls are now enrolled in school in Afghanistan, compared to none during the Taliban era. Now, millions of girls like Nouri fear the worst again. Meanwhile, the country's former president, Hamid Karzai, in a recent interview, blamed the United States for the current condition.
No, I think we'll be better off without their military presence. I think we should defend our own country and look after our own lives. No, their presence is what we have now. So we don't want what we have now. We don't want to continue with this misery and indignity that we are facing when our children die in front of their schools. No. At least we will know who to blame then when they're not here.
The Taliban and Washington entered into a landmark deal last year. The US-Taliban 2020 deal paved the way for the withdrawal of all foreign forces from Afghanistan. The Taliban said it would not allow Afghanistan to be a base for jihadist groups, such as Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, and agreed to start peace talks with the Afghan government. The talks began last year, but have since stalled. But violence has soared in recent weeks. Several incidents have triggered speculation that the Taliban may be preparing to launch an all-out assault on Afghanistan's cities once the Americans and their international allies leave. while Afghan authorities insist that they are capable of reversing the Taliban's momentum, citing their opponent's lack of heavy weapons and vulnerability to airstrikes from Afghan forces. The insurgents are confident of success once the US withdraws its troops.
Alhamdulillah.
Praise be to God, the Taliban have absolutely defeated the Americans 100% because the arrogant Americans thought they could wipe the Taliban from the face of the earth. But the Taliban defeated the Americans and their allies.
We
are fighting tirelessly for the freedom of our country. Everyone else knows that the Americans and their NATO allies and the Kabul administration have been defeated 100%.
On the 8th of June, just 1 month after the heinous school attack, Taliban insurgents shot dead 10 Afghans working for an agency clearing landmines in an attack on their camp in the north of the country.
The gunmen shot 2 people in the camp's compound and then shot at other people inside the room. I was shot in the forehead and fell to the ground. But I got up again and I escaped through the window. 10 people were martyred in this incident, and 13 or 14 others were injured and had to be taken to a hospital.
For the record, till the year 2000, about 88 mine casualties were reported per month in Afghanistan. Experts believed that the actual number could be almost double this figure, taking into account those deaths and injuries that go unreported. The Halo Trust, who lost 10 workers in the recent attack, is one of the agencies that has been working to clear mines and unexploded ordnance in the years since the Taliban were ousted in 2001. It started its operation in the country at the end of the 1980s, mobilizing when refugees and displaced people were about to be repatriated to former conflict areas, still riddled with mines and explosive remnants of the Soviet-Afghan War. They had to pay the price for trying to make Afghanistan safer. The Taliban frequently attack demining workers because the workers help to defuse roadside bombs that the insurgents have planted. Though a Taliban spokesman denied involvement in the killings, a senior government official dismissed that, saying this was clearly execution by the Taliban. Despite this horrific incident, the Halo Trust has said that they will continue to stay in the country even after the US troops withdraw to finish their job. But these deminer workers are not the only ones on the Taliban's hit list. Even healthcare workers are not spared here. These are bloodstains on boxes containing polio doses. On June 15th, 4 polio vaccination workers were killed and 3 injured in separate attacks in the country's eastern city of Jalalabad.
One of the victims is my cousin. His name is Saeed and he was also my teammate. Today we started work at 8 in the morning. After half an hour, I heard the sound of firing. I was a bit away from them. When I went there, I saw they were dead and lying on the ground. I didn't see the attackers. I left the area very quickly.
Someone called us to say my cousin had been killed. Health officials should create a polio center here inside the hospital, so if someone needs a polio vaccine, they will come here. Many people are killed in this process, most of them aged between 16 and 20.
It is not an isolated attack. In March, gunmen killed 3 female polio vaccination workers in the same city. Health workers were forced to suspend their operations and assess the security arrangements.
My daughter was working as a vaccinator for UNICEF, and she also worked at the Jalalabad hospital. Today I received a call saying your daughter was shot down. When I came to the site of the attack, I saw two bodies. One was my daughter Basira. At first I thought they were injured, but then I realized they were dead.
Two of our polio worker sisters came here to give the anti-polio vaccine to children. They were waiting in front of that house for the children to come out when 3 gunmen attacked the polio workers and killed them. The attackers had covered their faces.
Though no group has claimed responsibility for these attacks, experts believe it was carried out by the Taliban. The fundamentalist group has been expanding its offensive. They frequently attack health workers, claiming they are being used by the West as a cover for spying. Afghanistan and Pakistan are the only countries in the world where polio remains endemic. The infectious disease remains a threat in militant-hit areas of both these places. And Pakistan has a notoriously porous border with Afghanistan. Such attacks can derail Afghanistan's efforts of building a better tomorrow for its children. As the troop withdrawal deadline of September 11th inches closer, thousands of Afghans who helped them for 2 decades are getting increasingly anxious. They want the US to evacuate them before the Taliban finds them. Omar worked as a translator for the US Army in Afghanistan for 10 years. He fears that this could cost him his life. He believes that his family will become an easy target for the newly emboldened Taliban once US troops and NATO forces leave the country.
If the Taliban come, definitely we must believe, because we will be in danger. They will kill us. They're not asking whether you work for 1 day or what you have done with the US embassy.
For terrorists like for Taliban, Daesh and ISIS, so this is not important for them that you are hired or you are fired. They will take their revenge. So they will kill us, they will cut our heads.
In recent weeks, translators have been protesting outside the embassies of their former employers, calling on them to act before their troops leave Afghanistan. Under a new scheme announced by the British government, more Afghans who worked with UK forces, mostly as interpreters, will be allowed to relocate to the United Kingdom.
We think it's the right thing to do, to stand by these people. They sacrificed a lot to look after us, and now we're going to do the same.
We are looking very actively at every possible contingency to make sure that we can accommodate and care for those who've helped us and are seeking to leave.
The Taliban launched major offensives targeting government forces across the rugged countryside in early May. They claim to have seized at least 87 of the country's 421 districts since the foreign pullout began. On the 22nd of June, the Taliban captured Afghanistan's main border crossing with Tajikistan. Security forces were forced to abandon their post. They fled across the border into Tajikistan. The captured border, called Downshir Khan Bandar, lies in the far north of the country, some 50 kilometers from Kunduz city. It is the most significant gain for the Taliban since the US began the final stage of its troop withdrawal. Just a day before this seize, Taliban fighters took control of Imam Sahib district, a key district in Afghanistan's northern Kunduz province. Clashes between Taliban and Afghan security forces that comprised of police and the Afghan National Army began late on the 20th of June. By the 21st of June, the Taliban had overrun the district headquarters and were in control of police headquarters. The district of Imam Sahib is strategically located near Afghanistan's northern border with Tajikistan, a key supply route from Central Asia. Another district adjacent to Imam Sahib that was captured by the Taliban is Dasht-e-Archi. Reports also suggest that Taliban militants have reached within a kilometer of Kunduz, the provincial capital. They have not entered the city, but have encircled it. Many residents are trying to leave for Kabul. Kunduz had been a stronghold of the Taliban before the group seized power in the 1990s. In the south of the country, thousands of people were displaced across Helmand last October following a surge in Taliban attacks. Many have resettled in the capital, Lashkar Gah, one of the few areas in the province still under government control.
Our family had to flee to Kuala-i-Kena when the Taliban seized our house in Lashkar Gah. I have sacrificed 3 sons for this government and they have done nothing to help me.
Power sharing with the Taliban is a concept at the heart of the Biden administration's new strategy for Afghanistan, but violence by the Taliban and its recent aggression has increased despite talks with the group at different forums. The United Nations has warned that this poses a risk of insecurity, not to Afghans, but to many other countries.
It should be emphatically clear that any efforts to install a militarily imposed government in Kabul would go against the will of the Afghan people and against the stated positions of the regional countries and the broader international community.
India too has been calling for urgent efforts to ensure peace in the region.
Any political settlement in Afghanistan must ensure that the gains of the last 2 decades are protected and not reversed. It should, therefore, preserve the constitutional democratic framework and ensure the protection of the rights of women, children, and minorities. For enduring peace in Afghanistan, terrorist safe havens and sanctuaries must be dismantled immediately and terrorist supply chains disrupted. There needs to be zero tolerance for terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, including its cross-border one.
There are currently 2,500 American troops left in Afghanistan and about 7,000 non-US personnel from mainly NATO countries, along with Australia, New Zealand and Georgia. All of them are also planning to leave by September. The head of NATO, former Norwegian Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg, believes that the government and armed forces in the conflict-torn country are strong enough to stand on their own feet without international troops to back them.
They also realize that we have been there now for 20 years and we have invested heavily in blood and treasure in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan has come a long way, both when it comes to building strong, capable security forces, but also when it comes to social and economic progress. And at some stage it has to be the Afghans who take full responsibility for peace and stability in their own country.
But can the Afghan government forces really hold off the Taliban? Look at these videos released by the Taliban. These are areas that have been won in battle or have been surrendered by the government force without a fight. Currently, the US military and its NATO allies train the Afghan forces, pay them, and repair the American-supplied equipment. Who will do this once the Allied forces leave? Washington says it will continue to assist Afghan security forces and support the peace process. The Taliban says it will not participate in any conference on Afghanistan's future until all foreign troops leave. With no significant progress with peace talks, where is the country heading? The Taliban claims it is committed to peace talks and a genuine Islamic system in Afghanistan. They say this would make provisions for women's rights in line with cultural traditions and religious rules. But the statement does not bode well for Afghan women. It may roll back 20 years of progress on women's rights. The Afghan and Taliban negotiators are quietly likely to wrangle over the fundamental rights and liberties of women.
Partnership between Afghanistan and
On June 25th, US President Joe Biden met Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and the chairman of Afghanistan's High Council for National Reconciliation, Abdullah Abdullah, at the White House, where he called on Afghans to decide their country's fate.
Afghans are going to have to decide their future, what they want, but it won't be for lack of us being helped. There's going to be and the senseless violence that has to stop.
In the latest development, 650 US troops are expected to remain in Afghanistan to provide security for diplomats after the main American military force completes its withdrawal. A decision that has irked the Taliban.
Many of them have paid the ultimate price.
The war in Afghanistan may have come to an end, but does peace stand a chance?